Okay, hello. Good morning. So it's really hard to settle on the signature of this API. I'm really happy we figured out the actual technical implementation, and now it's kind of like the packaging of it, where we've been kind of going through these different APIs of, maybe we can just write it out here. So the initial API of Impact was like store provider, use store, create store, and then you would return something reactive here, and then you would have to, let's see, then you would have to like create a counter. Let's just use one to avoid the squigglies. So the point here is that you have to actually provide this store. So you would do store provider, but you could pass it props and stuff, right? But to be able to actually consume this, you would kind of have to do like counter one, and then you would have to do the actual counter one, right? It feels very, very awkward. You don't get that like progressive feeling of just going in and implementing state and the related UI, and then as it grows, you kind of provide it further down the tree. So this is not ideal. And then we have this other one, which is just doing provide. And then you can have a counter, but then you have to provide it. So you have to do something like this, provide. And by the way, sorry, so this one would need to use like an observer. Let's use the simple observer here, like from Impact, use observer. So this one would have to be an observer. And then you have this one, which would be provide. And then you could just start consuming it. Like this, use store, which is nice, but you would have to observe it. And one thing is like, maybe I should use the other observer, because that's kind of unique to Impact signals. So you would have to do like observer like this, and then oh my god and then here you would have to do provide observer like this. So it gets very like crazy. That's not very appealing. And then we have, but what's good about these is that they're very simple. Like it's a single function, create store, and we can take props, and then we get cleanup here. Props and cleanup. And within this scope, the props are like completely like observable. Everything's observable in this scope. It's kind of very isolated. And then we have this cleanup, which makes a lot of sense for store, right? Because it's not really about mounting and unmounting. It's not UI related at all. It's just cleanup for the store. So that all that makes a lot of sense. So it's more at the consumption. So the definition makes a shit ton of sense. It's at the consumption point that things gets a little bit iffy. And then we have this other signature which is like export default create component. So here we're not creating stores, we're actually creating components. And then we say like counter, for example. And we still have observable props, and we could still have cleanup here. And that's an open question. And what's really interesting about this is that we are now taking on like, okay, what if components were reactive, right? We're not kind of putting something on top of React as like managing more complex state. We're kind of replacing state management in React, and that is very exciting. but it's also more disrupting. So it's harder to kind of convince someone that this is a good idea, because they'll kind of look at the signature, I think, and then don't quite understand what it's actually doing. And then it's like, but why the hell do I want to do this when I can just create a function? Like, because you will be combining it with other components, right? If you have like a count component here that kind of takes in a count or whatever. So like, why have this signature when I can just use state here? And that's the problem with documentation. Like, the examples needs to be simple to explain the core ideas, but the core ideas isn't built for those simple examples. It's built for something way more complex. It's very difficult. But there's something like very attractive about doing something like this, because it means that you can just go in, and if you need some state for a component, you just go in and do this instead. And then as your component grows, or the complexity of the state grows, you can kind of test the boundaries of everything. You test the boundaries of the state, you test the boundaries of the UI at the same time. So if this thing starts to, like, if all your state management here starts to become, like, it gets harder to read, you can kind of just do state, create state like this, and then you kind of push the state management out of it. And the same for the UI, right? If it gets complex, you just move it into some nested component. So you kind of have this like combined idea of how to do things. But then again, you can also go in here and then you can like use a use effect here, for example. And maybe that's a good idea. But what if you do like a ref, like use ref? How does all of this kind of tie into the state management scope? It gets a little bit more unclear what's the role of the state management and what's the role of the component, while in these examples it's very clear. And then we have to provide another API if we actually want to provide this state. So that will be something like provide use provider, or use whatever, use value, and then create provider. So you kind of have to do that on the outside. So then you would have cleanup here, because we need cleanup to be an argument for us to detect when we need to drop out of concurrent mode. But this one would be like a floating thing. You would just provide state. So it's just, there's a lot of different mechanisms there. That's the point. You have this floating provide, you have the cleanup argument, you have the component which can use hooks. And I think it's going to be really difficult to understand how all this works. If we were to like remove the possibility to use hooks, I think it would make the concept simpler, because in Vue you don't have like hooks in that component, right? You just use it, and then, but that means that then it couldn't be cleanup here. Then it would have to be something else, like context or something, where you would do context provide. Well, that wouldn't help either. Like, you would still have to provide from the outside. So this is kind of tricky. But you would do on did mount, because now it's the component, right? You're defining it in the component. So now it makes sense to have actual lifecycle hooks here. So I think if we were to like really embrace the component, it should act as a component. Everything is about the component. So what I think you could do here though is that instead of doing this, you could have like const counter equals this. Yeah, this is interesting. And then what you would do instead is like export const use counter would be use component and counter. That's an interesting concept. The problem though is that since we only check the length here, we would do non-concurrent mode regardless of what you were actually using here. It's actually only related to on-will unmount that we need to do it, but we would do it in any case here. But a lot of these components yeah, this is very interesting. Like, and if, like, what's my goal here? So the primary goal is to be able to use reactive primitives in a nested manner. That's the main goal, or at least that was the initial goal. And it's the most important thing. It's to be able to use state management in a reactive state management in a nested manner, so that you have access to props. That's the important part. And then I really dislike this API because it becomes so unnatural to consume the stores because of having to provide them. That's the benefit of global, right? You don't have to provide the stores. You can just use them. But I do see that this becomes not ideal either. But you can do something like export default. But you can do it like this, right? And you can even do it like above, whatever. This is more syntax than anything else. So I don't worry that much about that one. And this is definitely like the cleanest implementation. It's just create store. It takes on existing create store APIs, but instead of just returning use store, which would make it global, it returns this provide thing. So you can provide the store through a component, you can take in props, and you can do cleanup when the component responsible for the providing. But there is an issue. It's like provide, what does that mean? Does it mean that you need to do that for every component that needs to use it, right? Because this means provide it to the whole component tree. So that's like something that's not like 100% clear. We could also inside yeah, like here we could also do, well, no, that's not good. But yeah, I guess that's the cost. Like, to avoid having to do this kind of pattern, you have to explain that provide is the same thing. It's providing this store to the component tree. Not to the component. Yes. And then we have this alternative of like, no, let's go all in here. Let's not think about stores at all. Let's just think about components. But we're gonna make a component reactive. And we don't need all these hooks. We can just write a normal, we can just write normal code. And we don't need these hooks. The problem with this one though is that all other components, they need to observe. What's interesting though is that you could, yeah, because the thing I really want to do is like, I would love to like normalize the observation in components. So you didn't have to, because I really dislike doing these abstracted like observer things. I really dislike it. And it would be kind of nice to say that, no, just use create component. It doesn't matter if you have state in there or not. They just become optimized. They are memoed, the props are reactive, and you can do like state management in there. But it feels more risky, like it's a bigger leap. It's like we're going into something quite new, and one thing is like for adoptability. But what I think this would mean is that it doesn't matter if you do state management or not. It's like, if you want to do reactivity in any sense, you will kind of use create component. And even if you didn't use any of this, you would still like do it like this. So you think about your normal components as stateless, right? So if you were to, for example, consume some, so let's imagine like this is a nested counter. So you would have counter, and you would say use counter. That's also interesting, because then we could make these providers, they would only work inside the actual reactive scope of the components. So if you wanted to use a parent counter, you would have to create like a component like this. And then you will get observability out of that. So every time you use create component, you know it's like, it's an observable environment. This is a really nice song. I guess it's kind of spent, but yeah, I like it. Yeah, and then you kind of think about all your other components as like completely, they are like stateless. That doesn't mean that you won't use hooks in them, but you just won't use, that's kind of the message, like don't use state in those components. But yeah, I just don't know. This is a really difficult one to decide on. Like this one is off the table. Like I've been implementing with this pattern, and it just doesn't feel right. That's for sure. So then it's more between these two, where you have to document what provide means. It's just a shortcut to actually like mounting a context provider. Yeah, so yeah, but you can use, like, if you want to use state from a parent. So currently the this use counter thing here, in the current implementation, you can use it both in components and in the reactive scope. Because you might want to use the state in the reactive scope. So that's also confusing. That where should you like use it? Should you use it here or should it use it here? But if you say that no, you can't use hooks here, then you can only use it here. So it just becomes more consistent. But you could use it, yeah, but you could use it here as well. Like I guess that's my point. It's like either you, that's what's so clear here. It's like either you're in a reactive scope or you're in a component scope. Like there's such a clear separation. I think it needs to be as clear here that either you're in a reactive scope, this whole component is a reactive scope, or if you have a plain old component, you're in the reconciling scope. So here you use hooks, here you don't use hooks, except this one. Yeah, I don't know. And the thing is, like, there's so many ways to do observation, right? You might not want to do this full-on component scoped observation. You might want to use like observer kind of thing and do more granular observation. And that's also kind of breaks here. While here you do the observation in and then it's up to the like state management package that's actually being used to kind of figure out how to best do observation. While here we are kind of taking on partially the responsibility of doing the observation. But it's, yeah. Maybe there's a version of this we haven't thought of. Like, it's just so appealing to go in and create a component. Like this. And just implement the state management. So the thing is, like, if I were to, like, if this wasn't built on React, if this was an actual, like, completely new implementation, it wouldn't have hooks. It just wouldn't. So then, like, these would be stateless. Like, that's how I would have personally preferred it. You can have a function component, but it's completely stateless, just like in Vue. You can't like do anything here. If you need to manage anything, you need to do this. And then you use your reactive scope to manage whatever you need to manage. Because that's a better runtime to do any kind of management. The only good thing about the reconciling scope is that you can just use conditionals to describe the UI. That's what it's good for. It's not good for anything else, in my opinion. So that's what I think is like, that's like the edge of the disruption. It's like, okay, if we have this create component, it's like you shouldn't use any hooks. It's like a hooks replacement at like its edge concept. You only need, anytime you need to manage anything in a component, you create a component and you manage, right? So if you provide anything and you want to use the management you're providing, you still have to create component and then state, use, counter, whatever. Like that's the only way, or maybe you even call it inject, counter, whatever. There are no hooks. The reconciling scope is completely blocked from using hooks, like conceptually. Yeah. It's definitely like we're getting used to this now, right? We had the whole week going through Vue, going deep into like how Vue works and why it has this defined component thing, like trying different approaches, but it isn't intuitive that the defined component signature is a really good signature for managing like a reactive scope and a reconciling scope. It's just but it is. But it's just not intuitive. It's something you kind of have to adjust to, and yeah, you have to adjust to it. So this is definitely more just enhancing React. You use React as React, but you can enhance it. And this provide thing would still put memo around it. And that's also a nice thing. It's like when you provide a store, it's like a short circuit of the component tree. So at that point, you know that, okay, here it will actually stop reconciling unless, like it will completely stop reconciling, actually, because the only way it will reconcile, like what it does is that it reconciles the props and triggers the props. Like there's no passing of props. Yeah, I guess that's another thing. It's like yeah, that's also interesting, because I thought about this. Like if you take props in here, it would be nice to think about this as a complete short circuit between the reconciling world and the observation world. So if you were to pass props here, what's kind of weird is that some of the props, like the props comes in here as observable, but they would also be passed to the counter. But there they are like reconciling props. So what I think is, if we were to do this, it would be a complete short circuit of the reconciler. So it would be like memo, and it would take in props and it would update the observable props. So you can't take in props to the counter here. You would have to take them into the store. And then if you actually want to, and like that's typically what you want anyways, because that's why you create the store, is because you want to manage state, which is kind of partially props. Except children. Like it wouldn't make sense that this component reconciles, because what would happen, it would reconcile this component first, then it would change the prop, trigger observation, and it will reconcile the counter again, given that the counter actually observes any props. Yeah, that's a little bit confusing as well. God damn it. Well, here that's more clear, right? You get props. It's fine. Yeah, exactly. You ref props directly. Yeah, so like technically what would happen here in terms of props is that you get the props in, but yeah. Yeah, we didn't actually explore that. Like technically in the current implementation, it would also reconcile this one. And then if the props then triggers observation, it will reconcile again. But that it doesn't, that can be handled so that you kind of short circuit rendering. So it depends completely on observation to change. So basically what happens is that instead of like the this internal wrapper around all of this, just renders whenever the component reconciles, it will be based on observation. So you kind of internally kind of cache the result of this thing. So if kind of the props change from the parent, it returns the same thing, so it doesn't reconcile. But then as the prop actually triggers, then it reconciles. So you would, like, as a developer experience, it would like make sense that you just use these props, and when those props change, it will reconcile. But it would be interesting, like maybe this would be like an amazing, maybe it would be amazing to like not have to think about hooks, right? It's the one thing that like the statement is React was amazing up to the point of hooks. When hooks was introduced, things started to become completely mind-bending and difficult to do simple things, performance issues, all of that stuff. It happened because of hooks. And then, but like creating an npm package for React that discourages hooks, like, or it replaces hooks, that's a tall order. Like, but that was kind of the thing. Like that was giving up on React, was like giving up on hooks, really. And I think it could be a really great developer experience, like having stateful components and stateless components. But we can't enforce that. That's the thing. We can't enforce it. And Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think this is like, but maybe it could be more of a stepping stone. Like like this is kind of the most important thing, and then it's simple, it separates clearly what's what, it builds perfectly on top of existing APIs that developers are used to. They just get this empowerment of being able to actually provide these stores through the componentry in a safe manner, as it has the cleanup that's guaranteed to run if you use it. And then it's still possible to experiment with create component. Like not even document it, but kind of just play with it. Because you would want to, like, if you had some nested counter component, like you would want to be able to like have counter, like inject counter here as well. And that's fine. Like that's how it works now. It's like you can choose if you want to inject it in this scope or in this scope. But it, like, you can, I think it's fine to just say this is a hookless this is a hookless environment, because that again, like that's the frustration, right? Hooks are difficult to use at a certain point. So what you can do is, okay, but create a reactive component instead and don't use hooks. That could be the framing of it. And then you call this provide and inject, so that it makes sense that you can use it in a nested reactive component, but also you can use it in normal components, because you're not using the hooks terminology here. You're using inject, because that's kind of the reactive terminology for this. And then that's it. It's like a hookless component, and we can block that. So that just stating, even though technically it could use hooks here, we block it. And that will make the behavior consistent between using this context and not using it. And it will be a memoed component. It will be an observing component. The only thing here that I would love to have done is look at Preact, how they actually do observation, and make this so it would actually start observing here. But then you remove the usage of all the other observing primitives, like yeah, if you want granular observation using the observable component, you will kind of lose it here. Hmm. Oh yeah, so here, if you want to use props downstream or like in a nested child, you can just do, like, maybe you get a user here, you say return props.user. You just use a getter. Because the prop is observable, so the only thing you have to be aware of is that you want to access, this is kind of the same thing as when you return, like if you have a store and you want to return count from your state store, you use a getter because you want to access state.count when you use count. It's the same principle here. It's like when you access user, you want to access props.user because that's what triggers observability. Like the same reason why you can't destructure props, because then you access the current user here and it won't update. It's the fact that you go through props that makes it update. But yeah, that's how you would do it. Then if props, if the user coming in from props updates, any nested component accessing user would also reconcile. It's really interesting. It's like a component works like very quickly, kind of breaks down when you want to manage things. Like it's very good at synchronizing external sources. But when you want to do something internally in the component, that like it very quickly reaches a limit of like mental and performance. And that's when you would rather want a reactive component. And reactive components doesn't use hooks. It uses its reactive scope to manage the component and makes it super simple to well, this would be CTX provide, and makes it super simple to expose the state to children. Yeah, it's interesting how yeah, because like the most like straightforward way to yeah, because we don't like you would have to like do. I guess you could have like let's just call it nested. Like create pure component or something. It will kind of emphasize. And I think this is the simplest way to do it. It's like you would, instead of doing observer from whatever library, you get that through, because this is what happens here as well, right? The create component has the observer primitive from the related library, which is how it makes this observable. And you could have like a create pure component or whatever, which doesn't have the reactive scope. It just has the component. And then you can inject whatever you want from the parents, and it just observes. So at least that would make it more consistent. And what's interesting is that if there is a way to, if we find a way to not having to wrap components, you could do this, and then it would actually be observable by just using a reactive component, that it would become reactive. That would be ideal, I think. But the thing here is that doing create pure component is, it would also memo. So you would avoid that unnecessary reconciliation because it's observing. That would not happen if you did this, which is the kind of the bad thing about, not bad thing, but the drawback of the preact approach. And even impact signals is that if you're not using an observer, you're not memoing the component. So you're not taking full advantage of being an observable component. And that's the thing I hate. Why does React reconcile when you don't have props? It really pisses me off. Yeah, because there's no way to keep this signature, and like you can't understand by the return type how to treat. Like it could with typing, you could kind of handle it. But you have to call this function to know if it returns a function or not. And this thing isn't called. Like sometimes it's lazy, right? If you're using the context, it becomes like lazy. So we wouldn't know, because here you want to call the function immediately because it's just a component. But yeah. It's also interesting, like we could block the hooks here as well. It's really going at it on the hooks. Like I said, the React team would hate this, but it would really hate this if the message is like, we're gonna save you from the hooks. Yeah, I like the context thing. The only thing I don't 100% like is that if we're doing only provide here, it will still become like a non-concurrent component, even though it doesn't need to. Because we're just checking the length. But that's... But yeah, it would be fun though. Like it would create like a strong message that hooks. Like what would React look like without the hooks? And this is what it would actually look like. Except that we kind of have to, yeah. Yeah, I thought about it, doing cleanup like this, but then you might do this because you don't want cleanup. So you would kind of, I guess you would have to do this. But the thing is, like, if we don't allow hooks here, you won't have, if we use cleanup, you wouldn't have on did mount. And you might want to do something on did mount. Well, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. It is a good question. Like on did mount is really just, okay, we got the UI now. Do we want to fill with the UI? It's definitely not like let's go and start a subscription now or anything like that. That's kind of the point, is that you don't have to do that. But people might think it, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, goddamn, this is tricky. This is tricky, tricky, tricky. But it is interesting. Like if I think about the article I wrote, this is really going at the heart of that. It's like how would React look like if it didn't take the algebraic effects path? It would have to look something like this. It wouldn't need create pure component because natively it could just make all function components pure. Yeah. Oh, you mean you mean actual decorators like pure? Yeah, it's kind of sad that. But yeah, typically use decorators in like classes. But yeah, they can be used for functions. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you could call it like, you could have pure, like it basically is this, right? So for people who doesn't want to use sorry, not observers, but decorators, could still do that. I kind of like this pure thing because it kind of also emphasizes that the default components, they aren't pure. Like they are, they're like they are pure, or at least that's what algebraic effects guarantees, is that you can run side effects inside the component, but it's still considered pure. But it's not truly pure. Yeah. Maybe there's like maybe we could even have like stateful and pure. Because what's interesting about this concept is that if you have a clear concept of a stateful component and a pure component, it also explains how React has tried to mix the two, and what the result of that has kind of been, like the cost of doing that. And the cost of doing that is the mental overhead of managing like complexity. So that could also be like a thinking about messaging. It's like, okay, React made the choice to merge the concept of stateful and pure by using algebraic effects, which has the guarantee that you can like do side effects inside like a pure component and still kind of guarantee that it still adheres to like this concept of a pure component of same input, same output, right? But that mental overhead and just the performance issues of the reconciler has just made that not a great concept. So what if we took the alternative path and we kept what React had before it merged these two concepts? It actually had a stateful component and a pure component, where the stateful component was create component or the class component. And then you had the function components were the pure components. But why not just call them that? Stateful and pure. And not use hooks. And then if you but you can still like opt into, you can still just use function components if you really want to do that. But it is really nice to be able to think about component as they execute the way you define them, right? So if I make a pure component that doesn't take props, it never reconciles. And if it takes props, it only reconciles if those props actually change. And then you can't use any hooks in there. Like, you know, it's the traditional pure. But you can still inject state from a stateful component, because that is pure. And it will only reconcile if the state it consumes changes. Yeah, it makes sense. And then it would be I wonder if no, that wouldn't be possible, would it? No, it needs to have this. It would be interesting, like if it didn't have. No, it would be the typing, right? Because the decorator of pure that still has the same signature. But if we were, I wonder what happens if you do. Can we test that? What happens if I create some component, and then a function nested component, and I give it props like string, foo string, and then I give it like some crazy context as the second thing. I'm not sure if it will actually nested component. Nested. Don't think it would actually give a type error. Oh, it would. Oh, sorry. Oh, this is interesting. This is very interesting, because we can actually have a stateful decorator as well. And that would just work, actually. Because the context argument is like not part of traditional JSX. It only has one argument, but we can still type that. So you can have a stateful and a oh, this is very interesting. Oh, I got butterflies on this one. Oh, this is beautiful. So you have stateful, Um, oh no, wait a minute. No, this won't work, of course. Because, yeah, how would that work? Because what if it actually returns a function? Yeah, then it breaks. Of course it breaks. Yeah, no, that won't work. Because we're returning a function from the thingy. And that's not valid JSX. That's not valid JSX. Oh, that's kind of sad. Well, you could do something. Yeah, no, it's kind of. Yeah, you could like trick it. You could say like. You could use the context and you could say like .ui and return that, and that would actually return. Like we would just type override it. So you would return null or something, but you don't actually return null. Ah, that's kind of sad. That would be so interesting if we could actually just annotate components. But again, decorators isn't like something that but it would be so cool. Because you would have to explicitly type these anyways. Is there a way to do this? Yeah. It's very interesting. Because what to keep in mind here is the observation, right? We need to wrap them regardless. Thinking. But then you would have to always use context, right? And then you wouldn't. Yeah, that's the tricky thing. It's this whole non-concurrent mode thing. What you could also do is, it's kind of interesting. Like if you made the decorators callable, so you could have stateful, and then you could actually have like true, like for side effects, or like not side effects, but like concurrent mode. So you would basically just say, I want to guarantee that this component mounts to actually run it. Like guarantee that it mounts to actually run it. And then you would need, yeah. That would be very interesting. It's kind of cool because decorators is very close to getting into the language now. Decorators stage. It's stage 3. What's stage 3? But is decorators for functions as well? Classes, which JavaScript function decorators. Stage 3 decorator. Yeah, because I'm not sure if it actually works for just functions. I think you have to use a class. Does class 3 stage 3 decorators work with functions? Yeah, it's always shown in the context of classes. I think it needs to be part of a class. Yeah, because like they've gotten really complicated. Let's try ChatGPT. What is stage 3? I can't remember what stage. Is that the last stage? Candidate. Yeah, exactly. I'm ready for implementation feedback. Stage 3 decorators in ECMAScript can also be used with plain functions. and not intended to be applied to plain functions that are declared outside of a class context. Yeah. Yeah. They are... it actually describes how alternatives... That's awesome. Until such proposals are formalized and reach an advanced stage. Yeah, to classes and class elements. It's so awesome that it... Oh, it's so helpful. It's so helpful. Yeah, so it would have to be... but again, like maybe we learned something from this. So we have our counter here. So what if we rather say counter and we call it stateful? And maybe someday we could use a decorator, or if you actually want to do it with what's it called, bubble. But I don't think people would do that because it's not a valid decorator standard. But yeah, you can call stateful, and then it's up to the developer to yeah, we never really talked about this alternative. Like, just let the developer decide if they want a guarantee that the component mounts, right? That's the whole thing. And then what we could do is yeah, I think so. That then if we do that, yeah, so because I wasn't sure what that flag should represent, but what it can represent is guaranteed mounting. Because what you could do then is you could do this, and you could still have the context if you would prefer that, but you could also just do on wheel and mount. So you would just have these floating functions, because you kind of have them regardless. Like inject has to be floating, stateful is floating. Like you just have these primitives you get from the package, like stateful, pure, inject, provide, on did mount, on will and mount. And then on using stateful, you can pass in a flag to guarantee mounting. And that's how you deal with side effects. Like it doesn't check anything. It's just, it's up to you. You know if you're instantiating something that needs to be cleaned up. And you just give a flag and it will guarantee that. Because what will also happen then? Oh, it would be so nice with the decorators. Like if both of them was just a decorator, that would be amazing. Oh, that's kind of annoying. Because now if you're gonna pass that flag, like you would have to call stateful, pass the flag, and then it returns the function you call. But that's also a thing. Like we can do it like you can pass a function, and if you pass a function, you just call it like this. But if you pass it with a boolean, it means you control. But then you could also say there should be a different, like you have stateful guaranteed. Fuck, this is so difficult. But it's interesting, like you could have, like just like Preact has like a bubble plugin, you can have a bubble plugin for these decorators, because like it's not a syntax issue to do stateful here. It's a perfectly valid syntax, I think. Yeah, which is interesting. So we could have a bubble plugin that allows you to define your components as stateful and pure. Like it's quite common to have bubble plugins. Yeah, that's interesting. I really like this. I just really like it. And then you do stateful, and then you would say just pass it the flag true. Oh yeah, okay. So pure, and then you can do stateful. Oh, can't find name. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, how would this be with typing? Function stateful. Yeah, so that's fine. What about pure? Function pure. Just want to make sure I'm not making... Oh, wait a minute. No, it's not valid syntax. Yeah, decorators are not valid here. Sorry. It was because I wasn't returning anything. Yeah, so it's not valid syntax. That sucks. Maybe one, but that is could be like a future. So we would have to say counter equals stateful. Oh yeah, let's remove that. Const nested equals pure. Yeah, no, TypeScript has changed to the proposal. The stage 3 proposal, so it doesn't support it on functions. And yeah, as I just saw now, TypeScript gives type errors or syntax errors on function decorators. But they might come to the language later, which will be very exciting. I wonder, TypeScript function decorators. Oh, interesting. Not to a raw function. The main issue is dealing with hoisting of functions. Any attempt to wrap a function in another function breaks the hoist. Oh, okay, so this might not happen. Executed in order, just like normal assignments in JavaScript. Yeah, it's the hoisting. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, anyways, That would have been exceptionally cool, but not doable, sadly. Oh, this is also nice. Like, no, and this is also kind of shitty. That thing I don't quite like about this inject is that we can't access the typing. That really sucks. Like doing this provide inject thing. It kind of sucks. Well, what you could do is instead of provide, yeah, that's interesting. So you could do provide like create state or something. And then you would inject create state. Because it's all about having the same reference. That's the important thing. Because you wouldn't provide inline anyways, I guess. Yeah, but that's a way to solve it. At least. That's interesting. Yeah, that is very interesting. Anyways, that would be a way to solve that. But yeah, the thing I don't like is that well, at the end of the day, you would have to wrap all your functions anyways. Well, except with preact and impact. Because you have and also if you want to do like very specific observation, you kind of don't, but I don't think you really need that. Yeah, it's something to think about. I think I have to stop the stream. But it's interesting. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a little bit weird to. If you put it first, it's a little bit weird. If you put it last, it's also kind of weird. If you call it, I think it emphasizes it better. But it's a little bit weird. But it could be, yeah. what's kind of nice about like calling it with true is that it even the syntax emphasizes that it's kind of lazy. Like it's almost like it says wait for the component to be true and then run the thing. It kind of highlights it. It's interesting. Yeah, and it's also a question of like stateful, stateless. But I guess pure is what we typically use. Wasn't there like a typing called pure at some point? Like the typing was actually pure component. And then they changed it to function component when hooks came. And then we could do things like if you want a ref, we could make that like reactive if we wanted to do that. But it's really like devouring React. Like talking about creating having to have two mental concepts in your head. Well, I guess this really makes you able to only have one, but that doesn't mean that like React hooks is like gone. It's almost like we're basically like creating a library, like a UI framework on top of React, which is interesting because React is very low level. And we are using hooks and everything, but we don't consider those hooks like surface area. But yeah, we'll need to play with it. Oh, it would be so nice if we had function decorators. God damn it. Is function decorators coming to JavaScript? I've started asking Google the way I would ask ChatGPT. ECMAScript function decorators. Yeah, like it's not even a proposal. Like it would be. Oh, in the face of what? Yeah, we're going to have them. Enable decorator for function express around function. You haven't provided a single use case example. it will be incompatible with non-ES6 code and able to distinguish between classes and functions unless fully transpiled. So wait, there are yeah. You completely. Wow, this is hostile. Nine years ago. Well, that's. Is there anything? Oh, wow, this was a. Whoa, that was a long. It's still 9 years ago, though. Yeah, that wasn't. Hmm. Oh my god. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, the thing that bothers me with yeah, the thing that kind of bothers me with decorators is that if you want to do them for like count number, and then you do like observable or something, you can't, like, there's this feature of changing the typing. You can have different typing for getters and setters. So if you did get count, you could say this is a number, but then set count value can be a string or a number. And you can't express that with an observable. So for example, for the promises of impact signals, it's a promise coming in, a plain promise, but you get an observable promise out. So you wouldn't be able to express that with a decorator, which kind of sucks. But yeah. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. Yeah, I don't know. God damn it. I don't know what we should do. I just, like, I'm very reluctant, just from the perspective of maintenance. Like, this, it's such a bigger project. Like, it's a bigger framework. It's a bigger idea. It has more risk with pitfalls. Like, what do I do to solve this? Maybe, oh, do I do with refs? Oh, we need to introduce refs. And then, like, it's just, it builds on. While this one, it has a minimal surface. It's a single function. You handle all the observation. The only thing we do is we give you a scope for providing your reactive primitives. And if it's one thing I've learned, like, even though doing things like this is super, super exciting, and like looking at what it could be and like how the complete experience could be like, it has a huge cost in maintenance. Just documenting the reasoning behind this and why it's better and everything. While this is like, oh, are you already using MobX? Now you can provide them in the component tree. You don't have to go global. That's the messaging here. You don't have to go global with stores. And we can still do this automating. Like, if you use cleanup, then we don't do concurrent. Yeah. There's no new signatures. Everybody knows this. Like, everybody knows create store. Everybody knows about this concept, which is global. And we made that tiny little change, and now it's scoped to component trees. But it's under the hood is way more complicated than that, right? Because you have to ensure cleaning it properly up if you're using any sort of cleanup. But that's kind of the whole journey, has been like figuring that stuff out. And there's no specific typing. You just go in and do this. But it doesn't have that feeling of, let's take a component and do this step by step. But if we were to take on that perspective, it's a much, much bigger project and a much, much bigger sell to the community. Yeah, that's how I feel about it now. Yeah. And you could still, like, you still get it, right? Like, you still get the same experience. Like, you have your function, you have the counter. Now you can just use the counter. Even here, you could say provide, and then you could have a flag. Like true, and then it would provide it to all nested components. One thing that I don't like here though is that if you don't have props, you have to type it as unknown. No, you don't have to do that here now. Oh, that's nice, because you can do, yeah, because with create store, if you don't have anything here, we can type it as unknown for you. And then you would type it here if you actually had props. That's nice. That is nice. Yeah. Yep. And then if you want to, you can drop observer here if you want to do that. And then you do like more what's it called? You do like div, and then you have like observer state.count. Well, depending on if you use the impact here, you could just do state.count, or you would do something like this, so you get like specific observability. It's very interesting, this and like with impact, you would do const use observer but I want to do one thing first. I want to do one thing first, and that is I want to see how Preact signals React 19. For other people running it, the current version with the compiler enabled works wonderfully with signals. Okay, interesting. So it actually works. So what we could do here is we can look at the implementation of that could have been like super awesome to basically make this an observer across the different solutions, using the implementation of Preact. Like, just look at how it does it. So whenever you use one of these stores, it will just observe regardless of what you're using. If we were able to do that, I'm not sure how to do that. Well, that's the thing. We could use the finalization registry for this. Yeah, you know what? That is an interesting idea. So we can use the finalization registry approach to clean up these observers. So what we can do is we can pass in like effect, auto run, observe, whatever. Like, they're plain subscriptions. No, wait, we can't use them. We have to use something. No, we would have to use. No, we have to look at the actual implementation of Preact signals. Well, no, wait, we can't do this because it would need a mechanism to like. Yeah, no, we can't do that. Because it would need like a start tracking and stop tracking mechanism, and not all these libraries has that. Like MobX doesn't have that. You can't like create an observing context that kind of just starts, and then whatever code runs synchronously will attach to that, and then you call stop on it. It's all like wrapping functions. But here we're not wrapping functions. which kind of sucks. So we would depend on the actual observers of the different libraries. But the point is, with Impact, you could do like use observer like this. With Preact, you wouldn't have to do anything if you had a bubble transpiler. I think. How does it work? Yeah, I think it just does it for every single component. Install the yeah, it just transform your components to be reactive. So with Preact signals, you wouldn't have to do anything. It's very appealing what they did there. Here's a component. Yeah, use signals. Yeah, finally store. Yeah, exactly. It wraps it. It's actually a very simple thing. Mode auto. Transform any function that meets the criteria. The mode option that control how the plugin transforms. There are 3 modes. This function will not be. Oh, okay, sorry. It has. The use signals hook setups the machinery to observe what signals are used inside the component and then automatically re-render the component when those signals change. The F function notifies the tracking mechanism that this component has finished rendering. It also unsubscribes from all signals it was using. Finland and this button needs to answer 2 questions. Is a function a component? If so, does the component use signals? Currently, we use the following heuristic. A function is a component if it has a capitalized name and contains JSX. So functions but includes a member expressing referencing dot value. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. So you have to, all function to. Yeah, if you're starting a new project, I want to use signals everywhere. Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, okay, interesting. By the way, do I have any sessions there? Yeah, I do. It is interesting. Like, what if we had a bubble plugin as part of the package where it would Yeah, maybe it could be as simple as like use counter store. So if it had store in its name at the end, like it started with use, it ended with store, we will make the component observer an observer using the observer from the actual like package. So you would configure Bubble to like so you would do impact react mobx transform, something like that, and it would transform any function component yeah. Could even make it memo. And you can still do this, right? It wouldn't matter if the outer scope was also observing. It just wouldn't do anything. Huh. That would be a fun project. So what if we did this and then the only thing it needed to check, you just had this convention of like use counter store. Use whatever store. And then it would just work. I guess a tricky thing would be, because you can define it in two different ways, right? You could do const counter equals, like there's different versions of this. So you would have to transform this in a different way. You would have to do like observer like this. But I guess that's the only like real check there. It's also the fact that if you depend on hoisting, that's a problem, right? So if, for example, you had this thing, we would change it to a non-hoisting thing. That's very likely not a problem, but what if I did, I could have done this, right? And then we would do const function counter equals. Then it would break. But again, this is like the benefit you get from this is quite overwhelming, I think. And the reason we can do this is because we have this abstraction. This is very interesting. I would love to try this, play with it. Yeah. Okay, I have to stop the stream. But this is very interesting, I think. Because the whole point is that if you want to implement something that's like beyond the scope of a single component, and most features are, right? Just a freaking sign-in form. Is multi-component complexity. It's so nice to just write all the logic for it in a store, and then you can just implement the UI. And then you just provide a store to the UI. And if you don't even have to think about adding observers, because you're consuming these reactive primitives through this very strong concept of a store. You know what we could also do, which might be better. So we could have function. Well, you kind of lose the typing there, but my store. And then we could say provide my store so you would just have a function that's the store, and then that's just define that in a file or wherever, and then you would import provide store from the package, and then you would use store my store, and then we could the transform could be look for use store that's imported from Impact React MobX. The thing is, like, now you have two imports. Yeah, no, should probably not do that. It's better to just have that convention, I think. Or it wouldn't even need to be this. It could be use counter. It's just imported from like it could rather be file name convention as well. Like if you import a hook from a file that's called something store, or it could be like a combination, like I don't know. But doing this transform, that's something I would love to play around with. Yeah, and also I think this term is just wrong. Like when you say memo, you're memoing the counter, right? But now we're saying you're providing the counter. That's the thing that's not intuitive here. Yeah. Like with store. Something, I don't know how to expose store. Something like that. With exposed store. I don't know, whatever. It's just terminology. Yeah, because like even observer, it's like you're making the counter something. Um, yeah, like maybe even better would be to like say store provider. Even that's better, right? You're saying that the counter is a store provider. Yeah, even that's way better. And you could say like counter. Yeah, this is interesting. Use counter. So you say counter provider. And then use counter, right? And then doing that transform thing, we can just look at the source code of Preact, how they do it, because it's very similar what we want to do. Our heuristics is just different. Yeah, question is... And it's also the fact, like a very early discovery, is that it's very difficult to understand the state management of an application by looking through the UI component tree. Because you don't know where the state management necessarily happens. While, and that's typically the thing, like you're gonna fix some UI or you're gonna fix some state, right? But you can of course choose. You can have like a store created next to a component if you want to do that, or you can have a stores folder and just have all the stores there. But I think a nice convention here would be a heuristic, which basically is, are you importing a hook? You just identify the hook. Is it imported from something store file? And if it is, make that component an observer. Yeah. And then the only thing you have to do is create store, write your logic, cleanup will handle enforcing the component to actually mount before it runs it, or will be mounted, and then you just start using the store and it will just work. And you can choose MobX, signals, you can choose whatever you want. That's really, really cool. Okay, but I have to stop the stream, and then I do think I have some more time today, so maybe we'll do another stream after I've eaten some lunch. Yeah, we'll do another. Okay, let's just quickly look at the signals. How do they actually implement it? Oh my god. Oh my freaking god. Ah. But it doesn't necessarily have to be this complicated. How does this actually work? Unmanaged, managed component. Well, it is definitely more complicated. Maybe there's some. Oh, oh my God, let's try this. How? Oh, let's try this. This will be amazing. I have a library where I want to create a bubble plugin that transforms React components. The way it should work, it should be able to transform. Oh, this is gonna be awesome. Let's see if it's actually able to do this. Function some component const state use counter import use counter from / counter store. Should be able to transform into TSX. So we would do import observer from MobX React Lite, and it should be some component equals observer. So it needs so the transform should happen if you import a hook from a file that ends with store. This is gonna be interesting. Could you write up some code for me? This is gonna be interesting. Crafting the plugin, crafting a bubble plugin. I'm just gonna try this, and then we're actually gonna continue iterating on it and test it. The plugin traverses import declaration nodes to collect names of hooks imported from files ending with store. It stores these hook names in state.imported hooks. Checks for existing observer. That's impressive. It checks if observer is already imported from MobX React Lite and sets state.observer imported accordingly. Identify components using imported hooks. It visits function declaration and variable declaration nodes. It even does both of them. That's impressive. For each component, it checks if the component's body contains calls to any of the imported hooks using the uses imported hook helper function. If a component uses an imported hook, it wraps the component with observer. For function declaration, it transforms. This is so fucking impressive. Ensure observer is, if observer was used but not imported, it adds the import statement at the top of the file during the program exit phase. Yeah, exactly. To use this plugin, this is fucking amazing. This is fucking amazing. Okay, so we're gonna do this after I've eaten some lunch and I have a meeting. And then it's very easy for me to change it so that you actually we can create a generic implementation of this, and then like each package will just like import it, and then we can pass a parameter for like where do you get the observer from, what's the name of the observer, like here, just change these. This is amazing. Ha! Can't believe this. Anyways, okay, thanks for following along, and bye for now.